Polyphonic Press, the podcast where two music fans pick a classic album completely at random. Using the patented random album generator, they are given an album to review from a curated list of over 1,000 classic releases, spanning multiple genres. And now onto the show. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Boyd and John Van Dyke.
All right, hey, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
And let's not waste any time. We've got the patented random album generator right in front of us here. So let's hit the button and see what album we're going to be listening to this week. And the album we're going to be listening to is the Arctic Monkeys. Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not.
I think I know this album, at least partially. I do like the Arctic Monkeys. I think they're pretty cool.
Yes, this is their first album. So this is what it says on allmusic.com. It says, breathless, hyperbolic praise was piled upon the Arctic Monkeys and their debut album, Whatever People Say I Am, That's What I'm Not. An instant phenomenon without peer. Within the course of a year, the band rose from the ranks of an internet phenomenon to the biggest band in the UK, all on the strength of early demos circulated on the web as MP3s. Those demos built the band a rabid fan base before the Monkees had released a record, even before they played more than a handful of gigs. In effect, the group performed a complete run around the industry, avoiding conventional routes towards stardom, which paid off in spades. When Whatever People Say I Am hit the streets in January 2006, it sold a gobsmacking 118,501 copies within its first week of release, which not only made it the fastest selling UK debut ever, but sold more than the rest of the top 20 combined, a remarkable achievement by any measure. Last time such excitement surrounded a new British guitar band was a decade earlier as Britpop hit overdrive with the release of Oasis's 1994 debut Definitely Maybe. All four members of the Arctic Monkeys were a little bit shy of their 10th birthday at the time. A bit young to be sure, but old enough to have Oasis be their first favorite band. So it's little surprise that the Gallagher's Laddism, celebrating nights out fueled by lager and loud guitars, is the bedrock foundation of the Arctic Monkeys, just the way as it has been for most British rock bands since the mid-90s. Their true ground zero, though, is 2001, the year the Strokes stormed British consciousness with their debut Is This It? The Arctic Monkeys borrow heavily from the Strokes' stylized ennui, adding an equal element of the Libertines' shambolic neoclassicist punk, undercut by a hint of dance punk learned from Franz Ferdinand. But where the Strokes, the Libertines, and Franz all knowingly reference the past, the Sheffield Quartet is only concerned with now piecing together elements of their favorite bands as lead singer-songwriter Alex Turner tells stories from their lives, mainly hookups on the dance floor and underage drinking, balanced by the occasional imagined tragic tales of prostitution and the music industry. Whatever People Say I Am captures the band mashing up the Strokes and the Libertines at will, jamming too many angular riffs into too short a space, tearing through the songs as quickly as possible. But where the Strokes camouflage their songwriting skills with a laconic, take it or leave it sexiness, and where the Libertines mythologized England with a junky poeticism, the Arctic Monkeys at their heart are simple, everyday lads, lacking any sense of sex appeal or romanticism, or even the desire for either. Nor do they harbor much menace either in their tightly wound music or in how Turner spits out his words. Also, the dry production sounding for all the world like an homage to Is This It? All clanking guitars and clattering drums, with most of the energy coming from the group's sloppy call and response backing vocals, keeps things ever immediate. In a way, Whatever People Say I Am is an ideal album for the age of information overload. Nearly every track here is stuffed with riffs and words, and just when it's about to sort itself out, it stops short. Instead of relying on a digital cut and paste clamor, the lead singer and lyricist Alex Turner is a natural storyteller, chronicling a very specific time and place. Like Weller or Ian Dury before him, he's captured his era in stark, vivid terms. He may not transcend his time, but he embodies it fully. Okay, so there are 13 tracks on the album. I'm not really sure if it's on vinyl where it would split, but I guess what we'll do is we'll listen to the first 6 and then listen to the last, and then we'll take a break, discuss it halfway through, and then listen to the other half. And so if you're listening along, we encourage you to listen along. And I have linked the album on both Spotify and Apple Music, so you can listen on your preferred medium. And so what we'll do, the album starts with the song The View from the Afternoon, and we'll take a break after Still Take You Home. And the album was released on the 23rd of January, 2006. Genres are indie rock, garage rock, post-punk revival, punk rock, and alternative rock. Released on Domino Records and produced by Jim Abyss. Okay, so here we go. Here's the first song on the album, and it's called The View from the Afternoon. So here we go. All right, and ending the first half of the album with Still Take You Home. This is awesome. Really like loud, fast, garage punk stuff. I'm really really liking this.
Yeah, well, I'm somewhat familiar with it already, but yeah, it's good straight ahead rock and roll. Yeah, some of it's really funky. I really like that. It's just a good time.
Yeah, and I didn't realize this until I read it on Wikipedia, and it makes sense, and I kind of relate to the lyrics is where was it? It's sort of it's sort of a loose concept album.
Okay.
In the sense that the common thematic content of the album has led to it being considered by some concept album concerning the lives of young Northern England clubbers. All tracks record first-person narratives of observations made within this context. Like, I bet you would look good on the dance floor, Still Take You Home. You probably couldn't see the lights, but you probably couldn't see the lights for. You probably couldn't see for the lights, but you were staring straight at me. That's a long title. Anyway, so it's sort of like observing club people, club kids, and I relate to that really, not so much now, but in my younger days, I related to that a lot because I like being in high school, I would see and going out to bars and going out for a night drinking, and I would see these people going into these other clubs and sort of just observing them and not necessarily being part of that crowd, but just sort of seeing how they how they behaved. And I think this is kind of what that sort of, these songs are kind of written from that perspective.
Yeah, I can sort of, I relate definitely with the observer instead of really the observee. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I never really realized that it was written from that perspective until I read that. I'm like, and then I'm looking at the song titles. I'm like, okay, all right. So that's really cool. That like this is, and I can definitely hear the Strokes influence.
Yeah, I can hear Franz Ferdinand in there too.
Franz Ferdinand, yeah. I mean, this is. It's weird though, because like the Strokes, that whole movement in the early 2000s, like this, you had like the Strokes, the Hives, the White Stripes, all those garage rock bands coming out, and then it was almost like dying off at this point in 2006. And when this came out, this sort of breathed some new life into it, I think. Because if you really think about it, like musical movements, like bands from those movements can last a long time, but the popularity of it and it being in the zeitgeist, it really at most 5 years.
Yeah, it happens as a bit of a blur. It kind of happens when a certain segment of the population are like going straight through high school or something like that, and it just because as soon as the next group are in high school, they're listening to something else. And yeah, I think this was like the last real rock movement.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, because what they started to call, and this is where the label sort of problem came in, because when we were in high school, indie music, this is what I thought of indie music or indie rock. And for some reason, around 2009, indie music, I'm nothing against the bands, but it became more like less guitar driven, like less electric guitar driven, more atmospheric. Like it was an actual sound rather than describing like independent artists.
I know what you mean. You're thinking of bands like Great Lake Swimmers and Broken Social Scene and stuff like that, where they're almost like a collectives became really big at that time.
Yeah, but even the style of the music is like that's the indie sound, like acoustic guitars and. I hate to say I don't know how else to describe it, but the word, I don't mean to sort of put it down or anything like that, but it's a softer sound.
Yeah.
This came out, I guess, just as that was sort of starting. So it's interesting that this album in 2006 was like the highest debut, one of the highest debut records in British music history. And it's interesting because like that whole garage rock revival movement was mostly an American movement. I mean, you had the Hives from Sweden and you had the Vines, I think, from Australia.
Yep.
But you had like the White Stripes from Detroit, the Strokes from New York, and so it was really like mostly an American thing.
Well, Franz Ferdinand were British, aren't they?
I think you know what just occurred to me. Yeah, it's not really an American. I think that was maybe the first. Maybe it's because of the internet. It was the first worldwide musical movement.
Yeah, maybe
because a lot. Like if you think about like grunge in the early 90s, that's definitely an American thing. You know, Seattle actually is very specifically a Seattle thing. You know, and you had these scenes in these different pockets in the world. I mean, you had the British punk rock movement of the late 70s, and you had, you had like all these different things. And I guess maybe it's because this is the first internet movement, like people spreading these bands word of mouth like through the internet. I would be interested to, I don't know that for sure, but that's my hypothesis, because then I was thinking like, yeah, you have the Hives from Sweden, you have there were some Canadian bands in there that like Montreal was big around that time, and you had and this like, and I was going to say is like England or the UK didn't really have any bands in that movement until these guys. But I think the American bands sort of influenced them, and they sort of carried on the scene and maybe made it last a little longer than it otherwise would have.
Maybe, but they did have bands in that. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Franz Ferdinand are British. If I'm wrong about that, somebody will say so. But yeah, they sort of struck me as sort of a British band.
Yeah, well, they're Scottish. They're Scottish. Yeah.
Oh, Franz Ferdinand?
Yeah.
Yeah, Scottish. Okay, well there you go. UK anyway. Yeah, so were the Fratellis, I think. And they came about around this time as well. Yeah, where was I going with that? Yeah, they were really good. But yeah, it's funny how that was sort of like a internet based sort of scene where things could spread by, through the internet as opposed to word of mouth from a localized area. But it's funny how it came about to sort of help other localized areas become scenes as well and become popular in other places. Like, and you mentioned the sort of the Canadian scene, and I mentioned a couple of the bands from that scene. A lot of the indie band sound came from, the Toronto and Montreal areas. Yeah, being, working with people, musicians and stuff like that, touring musicians, you wind up meeting some of these people occasionally. But I just thought it was sort of interesting how they, the localized scene wasn't a thing of the past necessarily. It was sort of helped along by the advent of the internet. It just became a little bit easier for scenes that wouldn't normally get the attention that they would suddenly get the attention that they maybe deserved. And I thought that was sort of interesting. But yeah, the rock movement of the early 2000s was definitely it was pretty worldwide. There's bands from all over the place.
Yeah. And really, I can't think of another scene that was that world. I mean, yeah, obviously there were in the 70s, there were punk bands all over, but I wouldn't, being in North America, you wouldn't know about like a Swedish band. And yet, like, from that movement of the early 2000s, I know the Hives. And so it's kind of cool that was like happening sort of all over the place and just in music in general. But yeah, anyway, like getting back to this album, I mean, I think what I really like about I like that they're taking the sort of the punk rock approach of they're really it's the short punchy songs that I really like. They're not staying around too long. They're getting right to the point. And I mean, I don't think so far we've heard a song over 4 minutes. And
no, in fact, there's only of the first half that we're listening to, only one clocks at over 3 minutes.
Yeah,
the first one.
Yeah, and I mean, these guys are really they're a young band at this point. They're barely in their 20s, and
I think they're slightly older than us. Just
slightly older, yeah. So they're like in their early 20s at this point, and yeah, so like they're like I can't think of another band that is like this tight early on in their that's that young at this time. They're just playing really well. It's I mean, and their songwriting is really interesting. The lyrics are really interesting. So they're just yeah, I mean, there's just really great rock and roll music is what it is. But yeah, and I'm really liking it so far. But I guess we'll get on to the second half of the album, and it starts with the song Riot Van. So here we go with that. Okay, and ending the album with A Certain Romance. Yeah, I mean, this is a great album from start to finish. I do have one criticism though of it. The song Riot Van. I wish that song was longer.
Okay, yeah, it was a good song.
That was a good song because I was getting into it was a bit slower of a song, and I was getting into the mood of it, getting into sort of the groove and listening to the lyrics, and it's telling the story about this guy getting arrested, and then it just ends very abruptly. And so I wish it was a little longer to sort of keep me in that sort of, I just got into the song and then it was over. So I wish if I were producing the album, I would say, could you maybe write another verse and just make the song like maybe a minute longer, then it would be perfect. That's my only criticism of the album. Otherwise, I love everything else about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that song was supposed to sort of be abrupt like that because the guy gets arrested, he's put in the van, and that's it.
Yeah. Yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I wanted, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's like it leaves the listener wanting more. It's like, oh, no, don't go away. I want more. I want to hear more about this guy. I want to hear more. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of great songs on this album, and I love the perspective from this album. It was like there's A Certain Romance, the last song, has got a certain amount of it too, but When the Sun Goes Down has always been one of my favorite songs of theirs because it's just about that guy who's just a complete twat, but for some reason people act like he's normal.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
He just, the girls like him, the other guys will just like treat him like one of the bros, but he's a complete dickhead. Yeah.
No, I related to that one very much so. Yeah, I mean the playing on this album is great. The lyrics, like, I know we don't talk about lyrics a lot on this show, but like the lyrics are really like very relatable to us. And Alex Turner, like, he's a very interesting lyricist. And so like he's writing these songs that I don't know if I relate to these lyrics now, but like they sort of remind me of this time and like relating to them from when I was younger and like seeing the people that he's talking about. And yeah. But I guess When the Sun Goes Down, that's a pretty universal thing. I mean, you're going to encounter people like that throughout your whole life, really. Yeah. And, I mean, I got to give it to the band. They're playing really great. Apparently, the bass player, Andy Nicholson, left the band not too long after this album was recorded or released. So they got a new bass player. But other than that, they've had the same lineup for almost 20 years at this point now. So I like to see that bands, it's cool that they've lasted because, I know this and we've talked about it before. It's damn near impossible to keep a band together. And it's cool that they've kept going. And this is like, because a lot of the time too, when a band has a strong debut album like this, it can kind of screw with them. Like it can get weird, and that can kind of make a band, like a lot of the time they don't last the first album. They release one album, it's a big success, and then you never hear from them. Or like they release a few more and they're not as successful, and egos get in the way. But I don't know a whole lot about their story, but it seems like they've just kept their heads down and kept just making music.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I don't know too much about their story either. I just know that I like their sound. I like their energy. Their overall vibe is really good.
Yeah, and like on here, they're really like you said, they're the one song Riot Van, loved the song, wish it was longer. So there isn't a bad song on here. There isn't a song that I don't like. I really got into the garage rock bands of that time, like the Strokes and the White Stripes and all that, but I never really got that far into the Arctic Monkeys. I liked what I heard, but but I never really explored their stuff that much. And I'm kind of kicking myself now that I didn't, because I mean, this is like discovering more of the music that I really like, that I grew up with. So it's almost nostalgic, but new at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their albums are out there, so there's more to discover.
So I think I know the answer, but I got to ask the question, would you listen to this again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. I mean, I'm really liking this, and I want to hear more of their stuff. And
yep.
Yeah. He's got an interesting voice too. I like his sort of Cockney accent and the way he sings with that. Because a lot of English singers will sing with
without their accent.
Yeah,
I know. And his is still very prominent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. So anyway, I guess we'll end the episode there. Thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. We want to hear from you, whether you agree or disagree with our review of the album. You can go to polyphonicpress.com, go to the contact page, and just drop us a line, say hi. And while you're there, you can, if you feel inclined, you can go to the support page, and you can that'll take you to our Patreon, and there's lots of cool stuff there. We've set up a chat, so you can get in contact with us and talk to other people. So if that is any interest, go to our Patreon and check that out. And all those links are in the show notes, so if you want to check that out. And I think that just about does it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.